getting old. I remember my granddad when he passed the plate, it shook. I noticed mine shakes too. Anyway. So, let me turn this on. Can you hear? Is that better? Okay. So, I had a recent checkup. I think everybody, a lot of people have been praying for me, and I appreciate it very much. Thanks for your prayers. I had a good checkup Friday, so things are looking better as far as I'm concerned. My big milestone was I got to take the trash to the dump. They had me on a 10-pound restriction for lifting. So, all right, so let's get started here. So I wanted to start out with these words, which I think most of us are familiar with, and it says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." So, looking at that, first of all, where would they get such an idea, and why would they need to explain that to someone? Obviously, the answer is why they needed to say it is that somebody thought that they were superior to them, and they were trying to say that, look, we're all in this boat together. We were all, we're created equal, and there's certain things that come with that. It doesn't mean that you're created. Some are created with more intelligence. Some are created in families that have more affluence and all this stuff. But there's certain things that we all have that's that God gives us, and that we all have an opportunity, and we all need to be looked at as. Is anybody really superior to the next person? So, so I think it's laid out pretty plainly in the Bible that where they got this ideas, and that's what I wanted to look at a little bit. It says in Acts, Acts 10:34, it says, "So Peter opened his mouth and said, 'Truly I understand that God shows no partiality, but in every nation anyone who fears him and does what is right is acceptable to him.'" So it looks like it says that God shows no partiality, and everybody has an equal chance to be loved by everybody. God loves everyone, but everybody has an equal chance in this kind of a thing. And so he doesn't have anything against anybody. It says, "But in every nation, anyone who fears him and does what is right." So there's some restrictions on how the relationship you're going to have with God by the things that you do and the way you act. But everybody has an equal chance. And this is further brought out, like in John 3:16, it says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes on him should have eternal life." So you got this whosoever, so that includes everybody. So we all have this equal thing. I want to look at in Jonah chapter 4, in the 4th chapter, or the first verse. Jonah, as we know the story, he's told to go to Nineveh and preach, and he wants he's supposed to preach that they need to turn to God. Well, Jonah, he hates these guys. He doesn't like them. He has this prejudice against these Ninevites. They've been enemies of Israel for a long time. They've done a lot of bad things, and here they are. God tells him to go and preach to them. So we all know the story. He says, I'm off. I'm getting out of here. I'm just going to take off. But the things happen to him. He gets swallowed by a fish. He ends up in Nineveh, and he ends up preaching what he's supposed to preach. And here's what it said. But it displeased Jonah exceedingly that he was angry, and prayed to the Lord and said, O Lord, is not this what I said? When I was yet in my country, that's why I made haste to flee to Tarshish. For I knew that you are a gracious God, merciful and slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love, and relenting from disasters. Therefore now, O Lord, please take my life, for it is better for me to die than to live. And the Lord said to him, do you do well to be angry? So here he is. He knows that the Lord looks on all people the same way. And he's kind of disgusted that he had such mercy on these people. In Matthew 5:4-7, it talks about God gives rain to the just and the unjust. And so here we have this characteristic of a God that he shows no partiality to different peoples. And since we're encouraged to be godly, then this same characteristic is something that we need to have also. Let's look at Timothy, and it talks about the benefits of godliness quite a bit here. So Timothy 4:7. It says, have nothing to do with irreverent, silly myths. Rather, train yourself for godliness, while bodily training is of some value. Godliness is of value in every way, as it holds promise for the present life and also for the life to come. So, there's great benefit in trying to be more godly. We often extol the benefits of exercise and bodily exercise, but he's telling us here that godly exercise benefits more. In 4:8, he says, I already read that. Okay, and then 6:6, Timothy 6:6. Now this is great gain in godliness with contentment, for we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. And Peter, in chapter 3, says, all these things are thus to be dissolved. What sort of people ought we to live? In holiness and godliness. So we're to be when it talks about godliness, it doesn't mean that we exalt the powers of God or anything, but it's about his holiness and about his goodness is something that we need to strive for. So when it talks about that he doesn't have any partiality, then that's something that we ought to look at. So in what areas do we show partiality? It's, it can be race, it can be economic, it can be intelligence, it can be, even if you have a job that's a little bit higher than another, and it's easy to look down on somebody else and as not as worthy. If you look at it, though, Jesus himself, when he was talking about, they asked him, "Who's my neighbor?" And he said, he gave the example of the Samaritan that helped somebody. In other words, and then he asked them, "Who was the neighbor?" And he says, "The one that did good to him." So here, we look at that and we don't think too much of it, but the Jews hated the Samaritan. They had nothing to do with him. When Jesus was talking to the woman at the well, the woman says, "What are you doing asking me? I'm a Samaritan." Jews don't have anything to do with Samaritans. But here's Jesus talking to her. And again, she takes the message back to the bunch, and then Jesus, or the town, and then Jesus talks to them. So it clearly shows that, there's nobody that we ought to be looking down on because of their status or their race or or what country they're from. So, we all fall into this stuff, and I can give you examples of me doing it. I was in one of the gas station stores. I went in to pay. I had this kind of a wallet that just had the money in it. I didn't have my cards in it or nothing. Kind of a coin purse. I ought to tell you about a coin purse. One day we were in a dime store with my dad when I was a little kid, and I said, they had a bunch of coin purses for sale, and I said, "Dad, you ought to buy one of those coin purses." And he goes, "Only cheapskates have coin purses." And I said, "Well, Granddad has one." He goes, "Yep." But anyway, so I had my money in there, and there was hundreds of dollars in the thing, and I went in there, and then I left, and then very soon I noticed I didn't have my wallet. So I went back, talked to, as the last place I hung it was paying out. So I knew it was, I'd left it in the store. So I went back in there and talked to the guy, and I don't know if this is the next day or so, but anyway, he has a video, of all the transactions that's coming on his video. So he shows me the video, and there's this shady looking guy, the tattoos and the other thing. He walks, right after I go out of the store, he comes out. And I just knew that was the guy that stole my wallet, that took off. I must have left it on the counter or something. So, I just knew that he'd done it. But anyway, so a few days later, I get a call that some high school girl saw my wallet on the floor and had picked it up and took it. And then she felt so bad about taking it that she turned herself in for taking the wallet. So there I was, totally ashamed of myself for having these conceived ideas about what some person would look like and impart bad character to him without really knowing anything. I could tell you a story about my wife too. She said she didn't want me to do it, but not too long after we got married, she's from Texas. We went to Washington to visit my grandparents, and anyway, one of the things that happened there, we went to like a Dairy Queen or something like that. And she orders something, and the lady treats her really rudely. And she goes, "Miserable Yankee." It was, it was a different adjective, but anyway. But anyway, there you go. Regional things that we it's just that we have this feeling of superiority against other people. And God doesn't have that. He gives everybody the chance. And I think that we need to be aware of it. It can be, in this country, there's been so much on racial things that what we're seeing now is it's reversed where, one group still hates the other group because of the bad feelings that stirred up. But we really ought to put those things aside. James really talks about it and explains, where this all goes. And let's look at that. And this is James chapter 2. And he says, "My brothers, show no partiality as you hold the faith in our Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory. For if a man wearing a gold ring and a fine clothing comes into your assembly, and a poor man in shabby clothing also comes in, and if you pay attention to the one who wears fine clothing and say, 'You sit here in a good place,' while you say to the poor man, 'You stand over there,' or 'Sit down at my feet,' have you not then made distinction among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? Listen, my beloved brothers, has not God chosen those who are poor in the world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom which he has promised to those who love him? But you have dishonored the poor man. Are not the rich ones who oppress you and the ones who drag you into court? Are they not ones who blaspheme and honor the name of which you were called? If you really fulfill the royal law according to the scriptures, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. You are doing well. But if you show partiality, you are committing sin and are convicted by the law of transgressors. For whosoever keeps the whole law but fails on one point has become accountable for all of it. For he who said, 'Do not commit adultery,' also said, 'Do not murder.' If you do not commit adultery but do murder, you have become a transgressor of the law. So speak and so act as those who are to be judged under the law of liberty. For judgment is without mercy to the one who has shown no mercy. Mercy trumps over judgment." So look what he says. We're to love our neighbor as ourselves. And that's what Jesus said was, the second highest command. Now think of that. Now if you love your neighbor as yourself, it really doesn't leave any room. You're putting your neighbor on equality with you. So it just, you don't have anything on your neighbor if you're going to love him as you do yourself. So to fulfill that commandment, we have to show no partiality in the thing. But it's so easy to do. Our pride steps in on the thing, and there's all kinds of. James talks about the economic, aspect of this, but it all, it's everything too. In this country, it's less than on that thing. Like when we lived in Mexico, they would criticize us because there was racial prejudice in our country. But there, a guy that had money wouldn't even talk to one of these street vendors. I mean, he was totally felt, like they were so far below him that he didn't even need to acknowledge them. So, it's these are just pitfalls we have. But it happens, if you think you're smarter than somebody. I worked with a lot of surgeons, and a lot of them were kind of arrogant, thought they had something on everybody else. But they really didn't. And so when the founders of when they declared, gave off the Declaration of Independence, they came up with all men were created equal. This is where they got it. And this is something that we need to practice and to realize that we're all standing before the Lord. Notice what Peter said too. He said about all these, he says, I understand that God shows no partiality, but every man, every nation among who fears him and does what is right is acceptable to him. So we make ourselves acceptable to God by doing what he asks and following his commands. And his commands are to love one another. And his commands are to love him with all our heart, mind, soul, strength. So anyway, that's the lesson. It's just something that we need to look at in ourselves, because it's just easy to look at those Yankees as inferior. Now she's one of them. No, so anyway. So if anybody has any need, we'd be happy to pray with you. If anybody has, any requests or anything, let us know. And we'll, we want to share our love with Christ's love. Came, he loves us, he died for us. He wants us to be in his family. He wants us to be buried, to put the old man to death and be buried with him in baptism and be raised anew and walk as we should. All right, that's the lesson, and we're going to sing, I guess.